I used to say this, but I've forgotten to say this a few times. But if you've got, I mean, you guys know this anyways, but if you've got comments or whatever, feel free to comment as we're going along. And I'll try and respond. Obviously, if it's off topic, I probably won't respond to it. But, if I'm on a train of thought, I'll finish that train of thought and then come back to you and discuss your comment, because your comments are as important a part of this as anything else. And I was discussing with Tom this week, it's like, they really help me as well, because they also make me check in with myself and make sure that I'm you're keeping me honest, basically, by asking questions, making comments, pulling apart some of the ideas that I'm sharing. So yeah, they're always very welcome. So feel free to jump in and feel free to just watch if that's your bag. So Paul, Haya, Mandy, Jonas gives me a thumbs up. Pulp Documentarian is in the house, and Andy Par 57 and Lazy Eye 0. Welcome back, guys. All right, listen. So let's get started. So this week's topic is surrender, and with a lot of these one-word thingies, there's often an agreed idea about what that means. And so partly what we're doing as well is we're finding a new relationship with some of these words and seeing how they connect. Tanya, welcome. Seeing how they connect with being a creative. So surrender, the reason that came up is because that was kind of where we ended up last week. And that was like the end of the conversation was around this notion of surrender. And so I thought, all right, well, that's quite interesting, actually. Let's pull that apart a little bit. And I think normally our relationship with surrender, I mean, I didn't look up the dictionary definition, but the way we use it is maybe in a war situation, or if people are, I surrender, I give up, basically. You win, you're conceding that person won. And that to me, Carly, hey. So that in this context is not what we're talking about. You see it a lot in religious context as well. Obviously, in the Christian context, there's a notion of surrender. But as I was googling, sometimes the internet can be helpful sometimes. So I googled it, and it came up with these 5 tenets of the Islam faith in terms of surrender. And so it's got its meaning in that context as well. I'm coming at it more in a secular way. So this isn't a religious conversation, but God is going to come up. You guys who've been on these conversations enough know to translate the word God into whatever is useful for you, so that you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Do you know what I mean? So you can hear what I'm getting at without getting all tangled up with, but I don't believe in God, or blah blah blah. It's cool. Just use another word, even if it's a higher part of yourself, the universe, other people. Do you know, whatever word is that you need to use that so that you can get what I'm saying. Lee and Sean have joined as well. Hiya guys. So how I'm seeing surrender, and I think how it's seen outside of those contexts that I've just previously said, is it's a willing act. In fact, in the religious context, I believe it's a willing act as well. It is not a passive thing. It is not a case of giving up. So I remember watching the Hollywood Reporter does these round tables with whoever is up for an award in that year. So they'll do best nominees for best actor for an Oscar or whatever, and anyway. So Sean Hayes, who plays Jack in Will and Grace, he was on it, and the moderator said, "What's the worst advice you've ever been given?" And he said, "Be patient." He said the worst advice he had ever been given was be patient. And I was like, why is that such terrible advice? And he had interpreted be patient as don't do anything, just wait. And I think in the same way, I think people see surrender in the same way. It's oh, well, if I surrender, that means that I'm not doing anything. I'm giving up. I'm not participating in my own future or whatever. And it's not that at all. You still engage with whatever it is you're trying to do, wherever it is you're trying to get to, but it's a willing act to say that it is what I'm trying to achieve is bigger than me. maybe what I want is small compared to what's possible if I allow a higher version of myself, God, the universe, whatever word you want to use, if I allow that to take the wheel rather than me, willfully willing these things into existence. So that's kind of what we're talking about, in this situation in terms of surrender. And, Steve's our theologian, our in-house theologian, so you can probably, chip in terms of where the Christian relationship with this comes in. But, when I was reading the thing about Islam, it was basically saying everything you do is for God. I think people who aren't religious find the idea terrifying. It's just like, can't make that guy in charge or something like that. I don't know. I feel like there's pushback anyways. I'm not sure. No pressure, says Steve. Yes, says Carly. I'm not... Anyways, yeah, but that surrender is saying that what we're talking about, we don't have to say as clearly as that, like, oh, I'm giving everything I do to God, like my marriage is to God, my creativity is to God. But it is that kind of like willingness to allow something bigger than yourself to be part of what you're doing. Now that, I think, is something that people could get on board with. Do you know what I mean? I think that won't have people feel compromised or somehow not in control of their destinies if they just say, I'm allowing that thing in, that entity in, God, universe, higher power, etc. Ryan says, give and take. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, a lot of people's relationship with God and prayer and stuff is, God, make this thing happen. Like, I was watching an episode of Blackish, and it was exactly that was what it was about. It was like, please let the Knicks win this season or whatever, or please let Arsenal win, or please, make my... things. People, I can't even think of examples, but people wanting things. They want things to work out for them. Sturgy Boy has just joined the conversation. Welcome. But really, what Ryan is saying, I think, is that that relationship is a two-way street. It's like, how would you guide me? What do you need from me? Because we always think of God as being this, like, sometimes we have a genie relationship with God. Defo, please let Arsenal win. Ovs. So we have a genie relationship with God in the sense of we're like, please give me these things. But it's like, all right, a surrender is more moving into the space of, what do you need me for? So Steve says, I'd talk more of trust. Yeah, I mean, I think that, this surrender aspect, it has to have a component of trust to it, because you're not going to surrender yourself to your next door neighbor. You're not going to be like, all things for my next door neighbor. Everything I do is for that person, because you don't know whether you can trust them to have your life in their hands. But when we're talking about a higher entity, then you probably know that you can generate the trust that you can put your life in their hands. And trust is not a belief that everything will be okay, but a trust is a belief that whatever happens, everything will be okay. So it's a different kind of order of being with that thing. So even if things look like they're going wrong, you have a faith and a trust that somehow these things are going to work out, and somehow this is meant to be. And it still doesn't mean that you are passive in it. It still doesn't mean that you just go, oh, well, God made all these terrible things happen, or my higher, being or whatever made all this, so I'm just going to sit back and just take the lashings. No, you are still active in it. You're still proactive and making stuff happen, and you're just allowing for that to be. You're just allowing that to be in part of what you're doing. Lee says there's no answers, only the drive to question everything. Humans are in each culture trying to display their version that they feel is correct for them. The other side is when one tries imposing out. So that's why I want this to be a secular conversation, and I don't know enough about religion anyways to even make it a religious conversation, even if I wanted to. So this is a way of being with all of that doesn't need to negate what anybody else believes. And I think that's the way that we, because Because there is a way to be with all of this that doesn't negate other people's beliefs. And the sooner we can start to get into that, the sooner that scientists can account for religion in what they're doing, as soon as religion can account for science, as soon as spiritual types can account for the fact that there's like 15,000 different religions, you know what I mean? As soon as we can start to account for other things and not negate them and not negate what we believe, that's when we'll start to move forward. So you're right, yeah, lots of different cultures do have their own belief system, and a lot of people think that they've got the right one and bless the other people they're trying. But that's not what we're doing, because we don't have to. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be binary. You don't have to go, well, I'm this, therefore I'm not that, and therefore that thing that I'm not isn't real or true. You can just go, I'm accounting for it all. That's another form of surrender. You know, that I don't know it all. I'm just figuring out what feels right for me without sort of diminishing what somebody else is thinking is right for them. Steve says, you cannot treat God like a slot machine in the same way we cannot people that way. Cannot treat people that way, you mean? Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can. You know, I think people can, and they do, you know, like, ka-ching, ka-ching, I'd like Arsenal to win or whatever. But, you know, ultimately, that's going to lead to a very unsatisfying relationship. And I think that probably if people are tracking something interesting, they'll move through that space of having that genie relationship with God and find another way to be with it. Anyways, I don't know. So on this matter of trust, Dagenham Proud says, Ryan even says, trust is a two-way street, reciprocation. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I suppose when you're talking about person to person, you do want a bit of... I don't know how much I can say about this, actually, because it's quite a big topic, trust. Maybe that's another whole conversation. Yeah. Because it doesn't have to be a two-way street. You can trust someone and they can not trust you. You can trust someone and they can be not trustworthy or occur as not trustworthy. But that doesn't mean that you can't give them trust. You know, like, if, say, for example, I watched The Star is Born yesterday, so the lead character is an alcoholic. Say there's an alcoholic in your family. You can afford them a level of trust, even though they don't act like a trustworthy person. Say they're being dishonest about, you know, money or how much they're drinking or something like that. It doesn't mean that you're believing what they say, but you've got a faith in them in some way. So I don't know that it has to be a two-way street. Maybe that might be a bit conditional, actually, if your relationship with someone is based on, well, you have to be trustworthy for me to trust you, and you have to trust me, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It's an interesting one. I don't know the answer. Lee says, there's got to be something out, ideas may differ, but we all have similarity in our religious texts. That's very true. Ryan says, I hope that's spelled right wrong. George has joined. Lee says, we are one. Hannison22 has joined, and Steve says the universe is mysterious. Sometimes things fall into place when we least expect it. Opportunities arise we did not plan, but if we keep our head up and keep walking, we find that momentum increases. Tom has joined. Tom says, good day. Are you in Australia? Steve, yeah, you're right. I mean that's all part of, because the next thing I had written is the universe has your back, in the sense of like but you have to have a level of trust in the universe to be able to sort of lean back into it. Remember those trust exercises you used to do at school where you used to fall into each other's arms? You know, surrender is generating that trust for the universe, so that you will lean back and it will catch you. And it's not easy. I'm not saying like it's easy in any sense, but that's surrender, basically. Lee says, do you feel cosmic ordering is in turn talking with this entity we assume heavenly or dimensional? I mean, again, cosmic ordering is there's nothing wrong with it. It's a particular relationship with the universe. It is like sort of getting out your Argos catalogue, your sort of divine Argos catalogue, and asking for the things you want. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to get into what heavenly and dimensional, because I don't know. But it is a conversation with the big I am. You know, it is a conversation with God or the universe, if that's what you're asking. Because that's where it's coming from. But that's not to say that the universe, you know, we imagine the sort of, you know, sometimes the universe is like Santa, like putting this stuff under a tree for us. You know, the universe just moves the chess pieces, which are the people in our lives, so you may pray for something, you may ask the universe for something, you may put out a cosmic order for something, and what the universe does is it starts to move people around you to deliver what it is that you're asking for. And that's how the universe works. And that's why I think we all miss miracles that happen around us every day. Because we're like, God, I prayed and I asked you for da-da-da-da-da. Meanwhile, your friend has come over to give you the thing that you think. But yeah, okay, she came over, but that's not what I asked for. I asked for you to deliver it. And God's like, I did. I sent your friend with it. So, that's the way. Does that answer the question in any way? Is that... Okay, so Sean has joined and Steve says the tension is between submission, trust and works, our efforts. Yeah, and we'll come to that because, essentially it's what I said up top is like, this is not a passive pursuit. Surrendering isn't what I said at the beginning, this relationship that we always think of as like, I've given up. I'm giving up. It's in your hands, God. Jesus, take the wheel. It's not that. It is an allowing. It's a state of being, and that does not mean that any of the things that you plan to do can't still happen. There's nothing that needs to change in what you're doing to be able to be in a state of surrender. Okay, so we'll come to it. We'll get to it. I've got a plan. Lee says fair dues, respect. Sunglasses emoji. Girl still answers. And Aussie Dinny 63 has joined. Okay, so the universe has your back, right? Now, there's different ways in terms of, because obviously the context of our conversation is always creativity. So one of the things that I thought is really interesting about creativity and surrender is like this idea that we can surrender to what wants to be birthed through us. Because particularly in the realm of writing, and I wonder if people who work in other fields like feel the same way, is sometimes writers, and I've done this myself, is like try and impose what you want to have happen on the characters because you have a place in mind that you want them to get to. And actually, a lot of the time, the characters, once you've created them, start to have their own voice and they want to say their own things. And if you will what you want to have happen, they start to sound inauthentic. And when people read your script, people give you notes or whatever, they might not put their finger on the button. Sometimes they'll be able to see it, sometimes they won't. But they'll say something's not right. And more the case is like you want, as a creative, there are ideas floating out there. I really believe that ideas are entities that are waiting to be birthed, and they go to the place or the person that they think they've got the most chance with. And sometimes, and they don't care about plagiarism or the rest of it, sometimes they will arrive at a few people at the same time, which is why you'll get there's like two gay conversion therapy films out at the moment. It's not by chance, it's because those ideas are just like, I want to be birthed. And I'm not going to you might not be able to deliver, so I'm going to go to this guy too. Or maybe it'll be a different expression. That film will be that, and that film will be slightly different expression. So ideas are waiting, and we need our antenna attuned to be able to pull them down and be birthed through us. We're almost like a conduit. We're channeling them in some respects. If you can get yourself out of the way, that is, and allow these ideas to be birthed through you, instead of imposing your will. And so, a few examples of this. What's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert has a great TED Talk. It's like one of the most popular TED Talks where she talks about this. People giving examples of ideas, of songs, of poems coming to them and being birthed through them. There's a beautiful song by Jill Scott called "And I Heard," and it's a live recording of it. It's on Spotify if you want to listen to it. And she basically says, she was in her room or whatever, a hotel room, and this song came to her, and she had to race to a notepad to write it down. She says in the sort of in her talk before she sings the song, and I caught it. She didn't say I wrote it, I created it. She said I caught it. Even I wrote a poem called "Brit I Am," and the genesis of that came to me as I was trying to get to sleep, and it was like it was bothering me. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like, wake up, write this down. And so I ended up, wrote it down. I wrote down a verse of it or whatever, and then I went back to, tried to get back to sleep, but it was like, no, I've got another stanza for you or whatever. So I wrote that down, and that went on and on and on. And it didn't all come out in one go, but a lot of it came out in that one evening, just as I was about to get to sleep. I don't feel like that was mine. I tidied it up afterwards, but it wasn't mine. It came through. Quentin Tarantino says that he follows his characters around for a couple of months before he writes them. And you remember, like, when Pulp Fiction came out, one of the things that people really loved about it was that authentic dialogue between Vincent and Jules, especially when they're in the car talking about McDonald's and foot massages and all that sort of stuff. The reason that he was able to write, or one of the reasons he was able to write such compelling dialogue, such sort of authentic dialogue, is because he stuck around and let the characters express themselves rather than just imposing his will on them of like how he wants them to talk. And tellingly, you know, there's a lot of writers who obviously after that tried to recreate what he did. Obviously, they're now imposing onto their characters Tarantino style dialogue. And you could tell it just run completely inauthentic because you could tell that they were just trying to recreate what he had created. Carly says, yes, as an artist, it's the same for me. If I push my agenda, perfect word, it becomes problematic, sometimes dies or isn't so alive. Yeah, and it's not like there's a right and a wrong, we always talk about this, but it's like, what kind of artist do you want to be? And there's nothing wrong with being somebody that wills their work into existence. Sometimes maybe will has a place, but there is something quite magical about allowing something to come through you. I found that the jokes that I wrote that were, well, the jokes that came through me, i.e. the jokes that sort of, I remember cycling home one night from a gig and a joke came to me and it ended up being one of my best jokes. And it's that experience of it coming through rather than you having to generate it. Those to me were always the best pieces of creativity that I've had, inspired moments. But you have to sit down to do the work, to create the inspiration. Inspiration, we talked about this before as well, is like a sort of delicate dancer that needs to be ushered in. She needs to feel like there's room for her to do her dance. She's not going to meet you at the keyboard. She meets you after you sit down at the keyboard. Steve says, I could talk about this positively from a personal point of view in terms of what you have done for me. Can share if you like. Please do. I mean, you know. Laura Kim says, has joined, and Carly says, if I get out of the way, my work really hits the mark, but I have to be open and brave in letting go of control. Yes, it's certainly about catching something or going with the momentum of the flow. Yeah, and so exactly what you're saying, letting go of control, that's the surrender. And you see how it doesn't have to feel like anything, you know, religious. There's no, you know, Carly hasn't mentioned God or the universe or whatever. It's just a case of letting go. That's surrender. And who knows what she's letting go to, you know, who she's giving it to, but it's just a letting go. Steve says, open and brave. I love that idea. And Cynthia and Gwyneth have joined. Hi, girls. Okay. So yeah, a lot of the time you can just let the creativity speak through you and you just tide it up. The filter of who you are can then be something that can give it its flavor, but it's you know, you let that thing come out unencumbered. You know, when a baby's born, the mum's not trying to squish things around to make it look a particular way. You let the thing come out. You know, you don't want to mess with that process. Tom says, totally agree. An interesting challenge comes with a writing commission when you have to write down someone else's ideas. Yes, I can imagine. But even then, you know, that's the movement of the universe bringing their idea to you because you're the best person to birth the idea. So it's just, you know, it's just a little degree of separation that the universe has put in to make sure that, or the idea is put in to make sure that it has its best expression. As well in our game, Mike T535, hey, just joined. So in terms of our industry as creatives, it's also very challenging in the sense of like, we've got a lot of circumstances in what we're doing, a lot of basically a lot of circumstances that are outside or seemingly outside of our control. So there's a degree of surrender to that, you know, particularly as actors and, you know, directors and writers, where you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from, you don't know where your next job is coming from, and quite a lot needs to be set up for you to get that work, you know, especially as an actor. You can't, in terms of paid work, you can't just go, right, I'm off to do a bit of acting. You know, a play has to be written, it has to be produced, it has to be cast, all the rest of it for you to get your work. So from that respect, as a creative, you have to have surrender to your circumstances. You have to allow the industry to be what it is. You have to allow a surrender to your talent being what it is right now, for the industry being what it is right now, your creativity being what it is right now, your resources are being what they are right now. But accepting and surrendering to all those things does not mean that you don't have to do anything about it, or that you can't do anything about it. It's like almost like stepping into a game. It's like you could complain about the rules of the game, or you could step onto the plate and start playing. At least play, and then your skills can only develop if you step onto the plate to even play. So surrender is part of that. Just going, okay, these are the things. This is the way things are. But I'm just gonna take that first step in faith, and then see where this leads me. Because the who you are today, the talents you have today, the creativity you have today, the resources you have today, the friends that you have today, the contacts that you have today may not be the ones that you have tomorrow. And so who knows where taking that first step will lead you. But you must step. So that's how active surrender is. It isn't just a case of it's okay, I step forward in faith, like I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. I was watching this Super Soul Sunday session, Oprah's thing, and she had a woman on called, what was her name? I think it was Gabriella Bernstein. And her talk was, The Universe Has Got Your Back. That was the name of her talk. And she said something that I really like that I'll share. It's very short. She just said, sometimes our plans get in the way of God's plans. And I think that's one of the interesting things about surrender, is that, the human beings, we have this way of thinking we know best. And if you do subscribe to the idea that there is a higher something, however you want to describe it, then that is based on the unknown. All that humans can base what we want on is what we know, and we know so little compared to that higher being. So it's almost like comical in a way, in a very charming way, that we would think that we would know best for ourselves. And so surrender can allow for the unknown to come into our lives. And that's again where the trust comes in, because you don't know. You just literally don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's possible. There's been so many times when people have stepped forward, taken that step in faith, and created something that they never thought possible. Even when I was when I was in comedy, I only based what I wanted on what I knew, and the opportunities that came my way were never things that I intended. When I was offered Live at the Apollo, I was never thinking, I want to be on Live at the Apollo. And so when you surrender, I wasn't consciously thinking in terms of surrender. I was just doing my work. I was just going to gigs and getting good and trying to write jokes and just keep going and keep going and keep going. But I didn't really, the weird thing about being comedy is I never had a goal in mind. I didn't know where I was trying to get to, or if I did, it was all based on, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't remember ever thinking I want something specific. I was always more in the space of, I just wanted to work out. That's all I'm trying to do, is just have stuff work out. And it worked out in ways that I could never have imagined. The things that I got to do, I think partly were because I didn't take a little snapshot and have that in my mind's eye and just really hold on to that thing, like it's got to be that. I was just like, can it just work out? And it kind of did, in that sort of unconscious state of surrender, I suppose. Sly says, the artists even behind some of the greatest pieces of art, music, film, etc. have claimed the ideas came directly from above, and they were merely the channels or speakers, so to speak. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was sort of alluding to with the Jill Scott thing. She said it outright. This Gabrielle Bernstein, she says she wrote a book about the 5 stages of surrender. She says she channeled that book. The problem is, the only problem as I see it is sometimes the ego wants to hijack that experience and make it like you're something special, say Mr. West. You know, the ego can seduce you into thinking that by having this divine access that you are more special than other people. Well, here's the thing, everyone's got it, it's just not everyone's using it, or if they are using it, they're not using it consciously, they're not using it to create something that would give them peace and happiness and contentedness. So yes, we've all got access to this, and it is a case of surrender and listening. Ian says, you're having broadband problems. All right, so watch on YouTube. All right, no worries. And Steve says, religions frame the unknown in the context of a community. The assurance comes that the unknown is good and just, not diabolical. Yeah, I mean, I think that true unknown, it is exactly that. And the thing is like, even though bad things will happen, one doesn't know where that is leading to be able to absolutely describe it as an absolute bad thing. Now, let's not go too far into that, because then inevitably someone's going to say, what about the Nazis? And what about famine? And what about who knows what good has come from that awfulness? You know, who knows what learnings we've had because those things have happened. We're not at the end of humanity's journey, so we can't possibly know what value those things were yet. They're not to say that they weren't awful that they happened, but who's to say what the ultimate good that we can get from them is. Lucy's joined. Hey, Lucy. Joaquim says, this is a different version of surrender that I am used to. I think I'm a bit too stubborn to surrender. In this version of surrender, it will be much easier because it's a positive action. Yeah. Surrender is active, and it is, if you're in that space, then I believe you will be experiencing a sense of peace. You won't feel anxious about it. It'll be peaceful. Sly says, the idea is to be open to the existence of a higher being and to not take full credit for such moments of inspired creativity. Yeah, there's a certain, if you really are present to the fact that you are channeling these things, a certain humility that will come with that, because you're like, it wasn't even me. You know what I mean? You don't have to be like, excessively, faux humble, as it were. But yeah, there will be a degree of humility that comes with that. Steve says, we trust and submit to the universe that the unknown is healthy, creative, and positive. Is that a prayer? Steve says, our worst moments have the capacity to become the I'm not sure what mean, from which other life grows. Oh, you did mean the compost from which other life grows. Exactly. I mean, the thing that springs to my mind, I think of relationships, the bad relationships that I've had in the past, I think will give me the learnings to be the foundation for a good relationship in the future. I now know what not to do. I now know what not to allow into my life, So when there's surrender, then you can start to see objects as, again, this is how this Gabrielle Bernstein described it. Obstacles may be divine guidance or course correction. And we discussed that before, that, we don't know that the things that are getting in our way are bad or not the right thing for us. Maybe the universe wanted to take us around a few things to be able to get us to the place that we want, that it believes that we need to get to. And also, surrender means you won't miss anything that's meant for you. What is meant for you will not go by you. This came up, I think it was last week or the week before. If God puts a desire in your heart, He will also have put the capacity to be able to achieve that goal or desire. The two come together, baked in. God's delay is not God's denial is another thing that I remind myself. When the timing doesn't go the way I think it should, I remember that who knows what divine timing is in place. And I'm thinking I've been denied something, but actually it's just a timing issue. It's just a timing issue. And when you look back on your life, you will see that very rarely have you missed out on something that you should have got, or it's worked out the right way. There's very few times when you'll be genuinely like, I wish that had happened. Like, you can see with hindsight that things worked out okay. If you can ascribe that okayness about the past to the future, that's surrender. And surrender is a practice presence as well. It is essentially about being in the present moment and being okay with what's so. But being okay with what's so doesn't mean that you can't change what's so. So, for example, We might look at our, present political state. It doesn't suit everybody. Surrender is being okay that that's what we've got currently. But it doesn't mean that you don't think, I'm going to vote. I'm going to be vocal about how I think things need to change. The two aren't like mutually exclusive, So that's how you can still be active and be in a state of surrender as well. Surrender is like an act of trust in the movement of the universe. Travel bugs join, hi, yeah. And it comes from a higher place. So the ego might want to strategize and use surrender as a way of getting what it wants, because if I surrender, then I'll get all the lovely things that I've been after. But it really has got to be generated out of a higher place. And like some other things that we've talked about your state of being, about your presence, about your peacefulness, your contentedness, it is a conscious act that has to happen daily. There's the tricky part of it, is that it is not, you don't go, I surrendered on Monday, so am I not still surrendered? Like, you consciously, daily, even as I was before this thing, before coming on and speaking with you guys, I was just like going through the things that I'm choosing to surrender. I mean, ultimately you want to put the whole gamut on the table, because the more that you can put on the table, the more that can be transformed. If you're like, well, I'm not surrendering that's mine, well, that's fine, but you've got the awesome power of and magnificence of the universe that can transform anything, and you're like, nah, I'm not gonna. So you might want to just put it all up for grabs, not just your creative life, your personal life, your relationships, your health, your wealth, all those things we can put up for, surrender in an active, not a passive way, in an active way. And coming from a higher place, the ego doesn't have to have anything to do with any of this, because the ego thinks it knows it all, and it knows a little bit, but it doesn't know that it doesn't know everything. The universe is everything else that we can't even possibly comprehend or know. It's the unknowable. And also what God or the universe, whatever, wants for us is so much more inspired than anything that we could generate for ourselves. Because if you're coming from the ego, the only thing that you can really generate is based off of what you already know. So the surrender is also a case of going, look, I don't know what's out there. I don't know what else. I can't even imagine what's possible, but I give it to you. So Tonya says, I always felt becoming an artist was surrendering to it, having to realize this is just what I need to do, like it or not. Felt more like that decision was thrown on me rather than something I choose. Well, yeah, I mean, that is an act of surrender. Now, I suppose the other component you want in that is to lovingly and willingly go into that, rather than feel like, well, I'm an artist now and I just have to give into it, Gwyneth says, I don't get what you mean by surrender. So I wrote this, if this is helpful. Surrender is an act of trust in the movement of the universe. So it's a case of saying, I give this to you. I give my creative life, or I give my relationship to you. The you is whatever word you want to use. You might want to use God or the universe or higher power, a higher part of yourself. But it is a case of giving over that thing in surrender, in an active giving over to that entity. So it doesn't, as I was saying at the beginning, it doesn't mean that it's a passive thing. So you're not going, I give up. It's, it's all in your hands now. But what you're saying is, on a daily basis, I give it to you. You guide me. Does that help? Yes. Does that help? That's the end of my question. Steve says, like trusting that when you get writer's block, that in time the ideas will flow again. Exactly. That's a perfect example, because I mean, you guys know I don't believe in writer's block anyways, but maybe that's because I surrender and just go, look, okay, here's an example, right? You guys know I'm writing a book, and I have, I go ups and downs with it. Some days I'm enjoying it, and some days I am not enjoying it. And yesterday I was finding it very difficult just because I felt a bit tired, but I committed to writing a certain amount of time. So I surrendered to the fact that I am gonna write for this amount of time. And so what that meant was that I didn't have to look at the time or worry about whether I was enjoying it or not, because I knew that whether I'm enjoying it or I'm not enjoying it, I'm doing it. And so there was a sort of state of surrender to the process. I surrendered myself to the fact that I'm going to be writing until 5 o'clock or whatever. And I have my breaks, and I have my got a nice lunch planned and all the rest of it. So it sort of it took the Andy out of the process. Do you know what I mean? I just got on with it. And so what Steve's saying here with writer's block is, you surrender to the idea that the ideas will come again. You have faith outside of yourself that there will be ideas again. That's a form of surrender. Gwyneth says, yes, got it, thank you very much. Excellent. So sometimes the ego also thinks that what God is going to have in store for it is not going to be very interesting. But God, universe, whatever you want to call it, wants you to delight in being alive. And so you may find that it takes you through the things that you desired anyways, but it's just through them, not to them, because like I say, what it has in store for you is so much bigger and more inspired if you will surrender and let it and take action based on that. So, I did say Jesus take the wheel as a joke earlier, but that is another way. That's like I think that's sort of more of a thing that Christians would say, is like, Jesus take the wheel. But it is that in a way of just saying, listen, you know where we're going better than I do, so I'm gonna let you drive, and I'm just gonna keep observing and seeing what needs to be done based off of where you've decided to take me. And it will be your true north. We've spoken about true north before. I believe that the heart is a compass, and that it is the needle might be your relationship with God or your higher self or whatever, and it is always constantly set to your true north. And all you guys have to do when you're using a compass, you just make sure that it's aligned and that you move in that direction. That's your only job. And so surrender is a case of connecting with that higher version of you and moving towards your true north. Phil and Anya, hey. And so also, we talked about creative surrender, surrendering to your circumstances, and also surrendering to your purpose. We had that conversation before about purpose. Well, you can will yourself in that direction, or you can surrender to this purpose and just see what that generates, see where it takes you, rather than trying to manufacture something. So it's like an emergent thing. It emerges. You allow it to come through you, rather than, right, kids, we're going this way. Does this make sense? Do you see the distinction of like allowing something to emerge rather than just willing something into existence? It's like that thing of like, if you love someone, set them free. And if they were ever, you can't own somebody, so if they were meant to be with you, they'll come back, and if they weren't meant to be with you, then they won't. Then you've just set them free. I can't remember exactly how the phrase goes, but that someone in this case is you. So if you love yourself, set yourself free, like as in give yourself to the universe, and see what that generates, see what that allows to come through. I think that there's some things that can come from this notion of surrender. So one is, and I was just spitballing, there will be things in your own life, because we're all leading different lives and all in different things, that you'll be like, I just felt this sense of da-da-da because I surrendered. For me, when I touched into that space of surrender, it took away the need to compare, because I struggle with that, of comparing myself with other people, feeling like I'm getting left behind, like I'm not doing enough, like everyone's getting opportunities and I'm not, things like that. And I know that those things aren't true. I know them on an intellectual level, but you know what it's like. You feel these things on a physical, biological, you feel it in your body sort of thing. But when I'm in that space of surrender, I'm just like, those things don't even matter. All I want to do is congratulate those people. All I want to do is like focus on what is needed from me now, by the universe to continue this journey of surrender and moving towards my purpose and allowing it to emerge. Hey, Amber. It gives you this infinite patience. I'm not talking in the Sean Hayes way of like giving up. It just makes you patient. It just makes you realize that there's a specific timing to it all, and things will come to you as they're supposed to. And you feel so good about that. You feel so good about knowing that it's all taken care of. You're moving through life knowing that it's all taken care of. It also oh, hang on. Amber says, sorry, I was on train. I'll be back to listen. Also figured out my 3-month goal. Yay. So it also gives you a joy in all tasks because you're not worried about the end goal so much. You're focused on the joy of actually doing the thing. Tom Swanston, who's a coach, he gave me some very good advice recently when I was struggling with the book. He was like, okay, if supposing you were to carry on writing this book, what could you possibly get out of it? And like a light bulb, it all sort of fell into place. That's not how light bulbs work, but it all fell into place because I realized, oh wait, I get to write. I could just enjoy the writing. I've turned this whole thing into a goal fulfilling exercise when actually it's a writing exercise as well. And so I couldn't wait to get back to writing. Where I was dreading it before, I couldn't wait to get back to writing. And what am I going to do tomorrow? And ideas started to come, and I had a totally different relationship with the book. And now, and when I struggle again, I have to go back to that thing of just remember, you're writing. You get to write. You get to puzzle solve, which is how I relate to writing sometimes. You get to let go in faith, which we've talked about a lot. You get to see obstacles as detours into the right direction rather than seeing them as problems. You get to experience quite a lot of peace and contentment through the act of surrender, because that's what's there. That's what's generated in that space. So then the question is how finally. So as I said earlier, it's a state of being. It is not a to do. Today I will surrender. It's a state of being that you generate. And, meditations come up quite a lot through the course of these conversations. And that is one way to generate it. To be honest with you, I think it's probably whatever process works for you. Some people would like affirmation, some people will use meditation, some people will use prayer. So, however you feel that you can create this and be in that space is what's going to work for you. But it is something that you create every day, every time. And it's something that I'm just starting to practice of just like, so I can't tell you necessarily what the long-term results are. I can't imagine they're going to be bad though. But in the short term, definitely it quietens for me the noise of all those other sort of ego-based considerations, like I'm getting left behind, I'm not getting work, when's the next job coming, all that sort of stuff. Just chills the fuck out, because you're like, that's not what this is. That's not what this is. You can use words like I give this to God, or I give this to the universe, I give this away. If you don't want to use the words God or universe or anything like that, I just give this away. I give this away so that it can be transformed, or it can be what it is, whatever it is meant to be, whatever words you need to use. And there's a prayer in the Course in Miracles that this Gabrielle Bernstein talked about and Marianne Williamson talked about in her book, which is a form of, to me, having read it, because I've known this prayer for a little while, but having read it again in the context of this, it is a form of surrender, which this may be the words that you want to use. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? And so in that process, and that's an example again of how active it can be, because you're not just sitting here going, I've surrendered. You're going, what do you want me to do? What do you want from me? And I think, it came up earlier, maybe Steve, you said it, but maybe Ryan. It's a two-way conversation in the sense of like, okay, these are the things that you would like from God. But now you've got to ask, if you're really in a state of surrender, what do you need from me? You've got the bigger plan. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to say, and to whom? And they'll usually be very interesting things, or maybe things you were going to say anyways. Good. That was it. So next week is our last one before the Christmas break. And did I say that we're declaring and announcing our 3-month goals next week, or are we going to do it on the 30th when we start them? Let's do it on the 30th. Because, no, sorry, I'm lying. Let's do it next week, because that'll give you over Christmas to think about whether that's definitely what you want to do, and if you do want to do that one, like what the execution is going to be. My one is going to be a meditation, because Steve said, blimey, that was some heavy stuff, but good though. Well, yeah, surrender's a big deal, right? Tom says, okay, well, yes, we said next week. Okay, so yeah, my one's going to be a meditation, because I feel like, in the spirit of surrender, I think that is for me the next thing to do, is to just really be quiet and ask those questions. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say to whom? How would you use me? I think is a very interesting question to be in, rather than how can I get what I want. And it's not to say that there isn't a part of us that is valid to ask for the things that you want. I'm not saying don't, but there's a certain time when your needs are taken care of, and you can really start to look outwards and say, how can you use me? And it came up last week, but it's like, I think that's why so many people who are rich or become rich through being famous or whatever use that platform for other things. Leonardo DiCaprio is doing his thing around conservation and environmental work. So it's like, it gets to a point, and it doesn't mean that you can't be satisfied in your creative world at all. It's not an either or. It's like both working together to create something, so that your purpose and your desires and that higher version of you, they're all working together. It's not an either or. It's not now you have to become a missionary. Creative desires can be satisfied in the process of it all. It can all work together. George is heavy, yeah. I have a lot to process. All ideas I am deeply uncomfortable with, so it is good to think about. Steve says, you should read the prayer of Jabez. Okay. All right. I'm going to read Becoming by Michelle Obama. That's the next on my list. So that's it, guys. That's this week's. Finished a little bit early. If anyone's got any questions or comments they want to throw in, I know that was a lot. I know you guys can handle it. And look, at the end of the day, these are just ideas. Nobody has to do anything. You can carry on business as usual, and it's all good. That we're just stirring the pot and just seeing how the dust settles, and maybe you'll be standing on new ground. But if you're not, that is totally fine as well, because everyone is where they are supposed to be. Don't put any should on any of this. If it works for you to take it on and try out some ideas and different ways of being in the world, then that is all groovy. And if it doesn't, then this was just we just spent a nice hour together. Either way, it's all good, right? So listen, I'm going to leave you guys all there if there's no questions or comments or anything like that. And I'll see you next week for the last one before the Christmas break. And have a fantastic week. And just, if you fancy it, try it on for size. See how this surrender idea works for you, and report back. Let me know how you get on. All right, guys. Thank you for being here as always. It's been a pleasure being with you. Love being with you on these Sundays. And hopefully I will see you guys next week. All right. Have a brilliant week. See you soon. Bye.